I thought my neighbor had invited me over for coffee, but when I stepped into her living room, her best friend was already waiting. Changing everything I expected that night to be, it started with something small. So small I almost didn't recognize it as the beginning of anything. My neighbor, Claire, was the kind of woman who carried herself with quiet certainty. She was in her early 40s, with an ease that didn't ask for attention but always seemed to draw it. I'd catch glimpses of her across the fence in the evenings, carrying grocery bags with one arm while balancing a phone in the other, or stepping out into her garden in a loose sweater, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek as though she had all the time in the world. There was always something graceful about the way she moved, measured, unhurried, and I found myself noticing details I probably shouldn't have. The way her laughter carried faintly when she spoke with friends on her porch. The way she looked up at the sky just before sunset, as if she was letting the day rest on her shoulders for a moment before putting it away. We'd exchanged pleasantries before. Quick nods, polite hellos. Sometimes a shared joke about the trash pickup schedule or the noisy kids down the street. But nothing more. Which is why, when she leaned on the fence one Saturday afternoon and said, "You should come over for coffee one evening," my pulse betrayed me. It was casual, offhand, like she might have said it to anyone. But still, the invitation stayed with me. I replayed it in my head later that night. Coffee. Evening. Her house. By the time I finally knocked on her door a few days later, my nerves were louder than I wanted to admit. The porch light above her doorway cast a warm golden glow, and for a moment I almost convinced myself to turn back, tell her I was too busy, too tired, too anything. But before I could move, the door opened, and that's when I realized something unexpected. Because it wasn't Claire who greeted me. It was another woman, slightly taller, her hair swept back neatly, her expression calm but curious. She looked about the same age, maybe a little older, with eyes that seemed to hold their own kind of gravity. She smiled, not the polite, distant smile of a stranger, but one that felt knowing, as if she had been expecting me all along. "Come in," she said warmly, her voice low and steady. The air inside smelled faintly of fresh coffee and something floral, a perfume that lingered just long enough to make me feel like I was stepping into a carefully kept secret. The living room glowed with soft lamplight, shadows pooling in the corners, the kind of lighting that made every detail feel more intimate. As I stepped inside, my heart raced, not with disappointment, but with a strange, unexplainable curiosity. This wasn't what I thought the evening would be, and yet, somehow, it felt like exactly where I was supposed to be. At first, I hesitated on the threshold, waiting for Claire to appear. I'd imagined she would be the one standing there, smiling, ushering me inside. But instead, this other woman, her best friend, though I didn't know it yet, was the one to welcome me. She stepped aside, motioning for me to enter as though the invitation had always included her. The room felt alive with warmth. A soft hum of music drifted from somewhere deeper in the house, the kind that filled spaces without demanding attention. The scent of coffee still lingered, but now it was joined by the richer note of red wine. On the table by the sofa sat 3 glasses, not 2, and a half-empty bottle waiting patiently to be poured. Then Claire appeared. She walked in carrying a tray with small dishes, cheese, crackers, grapes, her expression brightening when she saw me. "You came," she said, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that instantly softened my nerves. For a moment, I forgot about the other woman. But then Claire set the tray down and introduced her. "This is Anna," she said. "My best friend. We've known each other since college." Anna extended her hand. Her touch was cool, deliberate, her eyes holding mine a beat longer than I expected. If Claire was sunlight, easy, welcoming, then Anna was something else. A quieter pull, like a tide you didn't notice until it caught you off balance. I sat down with them, trying to hide how unsteady I felt. The sofa was soft, the cushions giving way beneath me as I settled in. Claire poured wine into my glass, her fingers brushing against mine as she handed it over. A small gesture, but it lingered in my awareness like a spark. The conversation began lightly. They teased each other in ways only old friends could. Stories about college nights, about mistakes and laughter, about how they had promised to never let each other grow too serious. I laughed along, even when I didn't fully understand the references. It felt less like being an outsider and more like being invited into a private orbit, one where their shared history gave shape to every word. Still, I couldn't ignore the differences between them. Claire's laughter came easily, spilling out without hesitation. Anna's was rarer, but when it did arrive, it was sharp and genuine, carrying weight. Claire leaned toward me when she spoke, closing the distance, making me feel chosen. Anna, on the other hand, observed more than she spoke, her eyes catching details, my nervous grip on the glass, the way I adjusted my sleeve, as if she was quietly measuring me. At times I wasn't sure where to place my attention. One moment, Claire's hand brushed my arm as she reached for the grapes, leaving a soft warmth on my skin. The next, Anna tilted her head ever so slightly, watching me with a half-smile that seemed to say she understood more than I was letting on. By the time an hour passed, the awkwardness I'd felt at the door had transformed into something else, something harder to name. A subtle intrigue, a quiet pull toward both women in different ways. I had expected an evening of small talk over coffee, but sitting there, between laughter and glances, I realized I had stepped into something far more layered and far less predictable. As the evening stretched on, the conversation began to shift. What started as light banter, stories of college antics, teasing remarks about who was the better cook, slowly gave way to something quieter, more personal. The kind of topics that didn't surface unless the room was softened by wine and trust. It was Anna who steered us there. She leaned forward, resting her elbow on the arm of the sofa, her chin balanced in her hand. Her gaze, steady and direct, fell on me as she asked, "So, what do you do with yourself? I mean, really, beyond work, beyond the usual answer." The question caught me off guard. My first instinct was to retreat into the safe reply, job, hobbies, the basics. But her eyes lingered, and something about the silence that followed made me want to answer honestly. I found myself talking about my writing, how I sometimes stayed up too late just to get the words right, how loneliness sometimes crept in when the house grew too quiet. To my surprise, they listened, not politely, but attentively. Claire tilted her head, her expression soft, almost proud, as though she was glad I trusted them enough to say it. Anna nodded slowly, her lips pressing into a thoughtful line, as though she recognized something of herself in what I'd admitted. Their openness followed. Claire spoke of her divorce, not bitterly, but with a quiet kind of grief that still lingered in the edges of her voice. She admitted she sometimes missed the presence of someone who noticed the little things, whether she was tired after work or whether she'd remembered to eat. Anna's story was different. She hadn't married. She spoke instead of fleeting romances, of choosing independence over compromise, though her voice faltered for just a moment when she admitted, "Sometimes I wonder if I mistook independence for fear." The air between us felt charged, not in a dramatic way, but in a human one. Three people sitting together, slowly revealing the hidden corners of themselves. It was the kind of honesty that stripped away pretense and left us raw, but safe. It was in these quiet moments that I began to notice the subtle ways they reached for me. Claire's hand brushed my wrist as she took my empty glass, her touch feather-light, but deliberate enough to send a pulse racing up my arm. Anna, leaning closer as she asked her questions, let her perfume drift toward me, a soft, jasmine-like scent that lingered even after she leaned back again. The firelight in the corner flickered across their faces, softening their features. Claire's hair caught the glow, strands turning almost golden. Anna's eyes, deep and searching, reflected the light like glass, and when they locked with mine, I felt exposed but not unwelcome. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just visiting neighbors. I was sitting with two women who saw me, not as a younger man to entertain or dismiss, but as someone worth listening to, worth drawing closer. And as the evening unfolded, that realization changed everything. The laughter faded gradually, the way a fire burns low after its brightest hour. By then, the wine glasses were only half full. The music had softened into the background, and conversation drifted into silences that lingered a moment too long. I began to notice those silences most of all. There would be a burst of laughter, a shared glance between Claire and Anna, and then, suddenly, it would quiet. In those pauses, the weight of something unspoken seemed to press down, and I could feel it in the way my chest tightened. I wasn't imagining it. I couldn't be. Claire leaned closer to me when she spoke now, her knee brushing mine with a subtle familiarity that hadn't been there earlier. Her hand occasionally rested on the back of the sofa behind me. close enough that I could sense the warmth of her skin, though not quite touching. Her voice had softened too, slower, more careful, as though she was choosing words she wanted me to hold on to. And then there was Anna. She sat angled slightly toward me, her posture relaxed, but her eyes, those eyes, seemed to watch everything. When Claire's laughter spilled out, Anna glanced at me to see how I reacted. When my hand shifted, fiddling with the rim of my glass, Anna's gaze followed, sharp yet gentle, like she was reading me without permission. The tension built not through words, but through these quiet, magnetic exchanges. At one point, Claire stood to refill the glasses, and the room seemed to shrink in her absence. Anna leaned forward, her voice lower, quieter, as though she wanted this moment to belong only to us. "She's glad you came," Anna said, eyes flicking briefly toward the kitchen. "You've softened her lately. I can tell." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt dry, though my glass was still half full. I managed to quiet. I didn't realize. Anna tilted her head, studying me. For a moment, her expression softened into something vulnerable, something unguarded. "Sometimes," she said, "she doesn't realize it either." Before I could ask what she meant, Claire returned. She handed me my glass, her fingers grazing mine, and I felt my breath catch. Anna leaned back, her expression unreadable again, though her eyes lingered on me before she looked away. The silence that followed was thick. I excused myself, muttering something about needing water, and slipped into the kitchen. My hands gripped the cool edge of the counter as I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't just attraction, not the simple kind, anyway. It was the sense of standing on a threshold, aware that the ground beneath me was shifting, that I couldn't look at either of them the same way again. When I returned, both women looked up at once. Their faces softened, their eyes warm and knowing, as though they had been waiting, together, for me to come back. And in that stillness, caught between their gazes, I felt the air hum with an energy I couldn't put into words. By the time the clock ticked past midnight, the evening had shifted. The laughter of earlier hours had dissolved into something slower, quieter. The wine glasses were mostly empty now, the bottle resting lazily on its side like it, too, had grown tired. The room was dim except for the amber glow of the lamp in the corner, its light falling across the three of us in soft, uneven shadows. We had all drawn closer on the sofa without quite realizing it. My shoulder brushed against Claire's, her sweater warm against my arm, while Anna had shifted inward, her knee grazing mine every so often when she adjusted her position. It wasn't intentional, I told myself, just the natural narrowing of space as the night stretched on. And yet, every brush of contact carried weight. It was Anna who broke the stillness first. She set her glass down on the table with a gentle clink, then leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. "Funny how nights like this bring things out of you," she said softly, her eyes tracing the rim of her glass. "I don't usually talk about myself." "Not really." Her voice was calm, but the undertone was fragile. She spoke about how she'd built her life around independence, her work, her routines, the friendships that kept her from feeling too alone. And yet, she admitted, sometimes when she lay in bed at night, she wondered if she had confused independence with loneliness. "It's easy to hide behind strength," she whispered, "but sometimes I wonder if all I've been doing is hiding." Her words hung in the air like something fragile, too delicate to disturb. Claire's hand reached out, resting gently on Anna's knee. The touch was small, but it carried years of friendship, of knowing when words weren't enough. Then Claire spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I thought marriage would mean never being alone," she confessed, eyes fixed on the glow of the lamp. "But sometimes, I felt lonelier lying next to him than I do now. At least here, tonight, I don't feel invisible." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. I realized then that these two women, so confident in their own ways, carried vulnerabilities just beneath the surface, vulnerabilities they had chosen to show me. I swallowed hard, my voice lower than usual when I finally spoke. "I didn't expect to say this tonight," I admitted, my fingers fidgeting with the edge of my sleeve. "But, being here with you both, I don't feel like just a guest. I feel like I belong. And that's not something I've felt in a long time." My honesty surprised even me, but once it was spoken, I couldn't take it back. And I didn't want to. They didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss it. Instead, they both looked at me, Claire with her warmth, Anna with her steady, searching gaze. For a moment, neither spoke, but I saw something pass between them. Not competition, not conflict, but a quiet understanding. And then Claire leaned a little closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You do belong. At least here. Tonight. Her words, and the tender smile that followed, wrapped around me like a promise. And in that moment, I realized the night had turned into something far more intimate than I ever expected. The hour had grown late, yet none of us seemed ready to end the night. The world outside the window was quiet, street lamps casting their pale circles of light onto an empty road, the occasional rustle of wind brushing past the trees. Inside, the living room felt cocooned, as though time had slowed to hold the three of us in place. I sat between them now, the space that once separated us completely gone. Claire's shoulder rested lightly against mine, her warmth a steady presence. On my other side, Anna's arm brushed mine when she shifted, her perfume still lingering in the air. Every small movement, every shared glance, felt charged with meaning. Part of me wrestled with the thought that I was supposed to choose between the easy warmth of Claire and the searching intensity of Anna. That's how stories usually go, isn't it? One person wins the heart, the other fades into memory. Yet sitting there, I couldn't imagine choosing. My heart wasn't torn in two. It was expanding, making room for both of them in ways I hadn't thought possible. The silence was comfortable now, threaded with trust. It was Claire who broke it first. She turned slightly toward me, her voice soft, almost playful but trembling at the edges. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. What are you thinking? I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the stem of my empty glass. That, I'm caught between something impossible, I said honestly. That I feel drawn to both of you, and I don't know what that means. The confession spilled out, unpolished, vulnerable. For a moment, I feared it would fracture the delicate balance we'd built tonight. But instead of discomfort, there was a pause, followed by a quiet laugh. Not mocking, not dismissive. A laugh shared between them. Anna leaned back, her eyes softening as she studied me. You think you have to choose, she said gently, her tone carrying both humor and understanding. But not everything in life is so neatly divided. Claire reached for my hand then, her fingers curling around mine. The touch was tender, grounding. At the same time, Anna's hand came to rest on my shoulder, warm and steady. I felt surrounded, not trapped, not conflicted, but embraced. There was no competition in their gestures, no jealousy. Instead, there was acceptance, a silent agreement passing between them that I was not meant to divide my heart, but to share it. The room was hushed, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My breath slowed, my chest loosening as if the weight I'd been carrying had finally lifted. In that moment, I realized the truth. The choice I thought I had to make wasn't a choice at all. It was something freer, something more generous. They weren't asking me to pick. They were asking me to stay. And as their touches lingered, one hand on mine, the other on my shoulder, I felt the quiet assurance that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The night had grown quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after trust has been earned and walls have gently fallen away. The lamp still glowed in the corner, its light softer now, as though it too had settled into the stillness of the room. Outside, the world was asleep. But in that small circle of warmth, three figures pressed close together, the night still lived. We didn't speak much anymore. Words felt unnecessary. Instead, there was presence, the comfort of bodies near each other, the ease of simply existing without needing to fill the silence. Claire leaned into me, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. The weight of her felt natural, as though she had been leaning there all along, and I had only just noticed. Her hair brushed against my cheek, carrying the faint scent of lavender from her shampoo. Anna's hand remained over mine, her touch steady, her thumb brushing absently against my skin in a rhythm that felt both grounding and protective. Every now and then, she glanced toward Claire, a small, knowing smile flickering at the corner of her lips. There was no rivalry in her expression, no sharpness, only tenderness. I sat between them, aware of every breath, every shared glance, every small movement. And for the first time that night, the knot in my chest completely loosened. I realized I didn't have to explain or analyze what this was. It didn't need a label, not tonight. It was enough that I was here, that we were together, and that we had chosen this quiet, unexpected closeness. The clock ticked on, but time no longer mattered. What mattered was the way Claire's cheek rested against me, the quiet steadiness of her breathing aligning with mine. What mattered was Anna's hand lingering over mine, her warmth seeping into my skin. And what mattered most was the way I felt, seen, held, and accepted, not by one, but by both. Eventually, Claire stirred. She lifted her head just enough to glance at Anna, her voice a whisper that seemed to carry more than words. "It's late." Anna smiled faintly, squeezing my hand before answering. "It doesn't feel late." They both looked at me then, not with expectation, not with pressure, but with a softness that invited me deeper into their world. It struck me that this wasn't just their story or mine. It was something shared, something fragile yet strong, something that could only exist because all three of us were here, choosing it together. As the night drew toward its end, I felt no rush to leave. There was no urgency, no demand, only the quiet assurance that I was welcome. That belonging wasn't about ownership or choosing sides. It was about being embraced in full. When I finally closed my eyes, with Claire resting against me and Anna's hand still wrapped around mine, I thought of how unexpected it all had been. A simple invitation for coffee had become a doorway into something larger, gentler, and more profound than I had imagined. And as I let the night carry me into its stillness, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new kind of together.